Good day, audience. This is Mr. Sean Neff speaking here. I'm interviewing Donny Jurgens, the chairperson of South African Gymnastics. He's also an activist and has been part of the struggle for as long as I can remember. I'm just doing a light interview with him today just to give an idea of what happened, how far we've come, and what needs to still be done in our quest for democracy, real democracy as we know it. Welcome, Donovan, to the live podcast. It's not live yet, but it's going to be almost as a live thing that I'm going to introduce on Facebook and various other social media. And I'll just ask you to start off. Just say has it all begun, and also who was the role players in your life, who played that one role that brought you into the struggle, giving them a little bit of acknowledgement, as it were. And I know from previous reading, I think Trevor Armstrong was a
Yes.
big guy in your development. But I leave it all over to you.
Hi, thank you, Sean. Wow, it is a long history to try and cover in a few minutes, but in terms of sort of struggle and conscientization and where did it all start for me, it started at high school. I was at Oakland's High School, and in 1976, I was in Standard 8. So that means I was about, in fact, I was 15 years old. Um, And to be quite honest, at that young age, when the boycotts and stuff started, I wasn't really particularly interested. I was quite young. I was very into chess at that stage, and we continued to play chess while everybody else was marching outside. And I think the first time I really got involved was when we did the march to Alexander Sinton when all the schools went there.
Sure.
So I joined that particular march because I mean the whole school was sort of swept up in that fervor. And so my first taste of tear gas, if one can call it a taste,
Sure.
was at that particular event. And we were running in the vicinity of City and Suburban, the Rugby City Park,
Sure.
rugby there, and climbing over people's walls and the police chasing us. Um, so I would say more or less the second half of 1976 is when I sort of became involved in some ways. And if I think of people that influenced that part of my life. My English and Latin teacher at the time was in the Unity movement. His name was Norman Abrams. He was the brother of Ivan Abrams. Ivan Abrams was the father of Lucy Abrams, those sort of famous people in the struggle. And a few Unity movement teachers did some awareness classes for students with sort of what they consider to have some leadership potential. And funny enough, Albert Fritz, now MEC for Community Safety, who's also a member of Hanover Park Youth, lived in Hanover Park, etc. We were at Oaklands together. He was in the Afrikaans class and I was in the English class. And I remember them coming to pick us up at our homes and then taking us on a Sunday afternoon for sort of political classes. And I
Sure.
stayed in Lotus River,
Good.
and Norman Abrams stayed in Albert Road, Lansdowne. And I remember very vividly, he had a yellow Volkswagen variant, that station wagon type, and he would drive all the way to Lotus River to come and pick us up,
Sure.
pick me up, and then we would have these political discussions. So I think I must credit the Unity movement for part of my political upbringing. Um, and then from matric, I went to Hewitt Training College, and then I actually moved to Newfields, Hanover Park, through Bertie Fritz's connection, and I ended up staying with at Trevor Armstrong's house. Trevor Armstrong and Isaac Peterson, the late Isaac Peterson, they stayed opposite each other. They were very much involved in Hanover Park Civic, and then through Hanover Park Youth, Hanover Park Civic, I got heavily involved. I was a chairperson of Hanover Park Youth. Some of the people you mentioned earlier on, and I mean, if I start mentioning names, I can go on
Sure.
forever and ever and ever.
Sure.
I think one of the the good things, and we're talking in general, it's up to you to edit later, but is that a lot of those relationships we started in those years already have actually continued, and really good qualitative friendships were followed. I mean, some of those people I'm in
Still
contact with
friends with.
up till today.
Sure.
If I take my secretary at that time, Patricia Abrams at that stage, now Hendricks, we are still in close contact. In fact, she's my life coach now.
Sure.
Ryland Fisher and I is one of my four best friends in the entire world. Um, so a lot of those relationships, and I mean that goes on and on and on into Mitchell's Plain,
Sure.
into Tafelsig.
Just to break you a little
Yeah.
bit, I happened to just speak to my own brother, and you know Joseph as well, Joseph Neff, very well. And he mentioned that Patricia Abrams was the one that came to fetch us to join the Nova Park youth movement.
Yeah.
That is just, you were just mentioning Patricia now as well.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how small the world is,
Absolutely.
and those relationships are still valid today.
Yeah.
It is not platonic things. It wasn't for interest or self-interest. It was really friendship and Ubuntu, really all about building and bringing things and making things better.
Yeah.
So
And even if you go to the next level, let's say beyond friendship. So let's take a person like yourself, Joseph, etc. So it's not as if you were like close. You were at my 40th, or I was at your 40th, but the relationship with comrades remains to the extent where you can pick up the phone and say,
absolutely,
I have a challenge, can you assist? And by and
absolutely,
large, just I think as a result of that kind of relationship we've built over, it's almost natural.
absolutely,
And even in some of the jobs I've been in the past, people marvel, and it's not just me. There's a challenge, and generally speaking, within 2 or 3 phone calls, you've got the challenge solved through the network
sure,
you've built up, and it looks like hell of impressive,
sure.
So, I mean, not to name drop or anything.
Yes.
So, Ibi Musa or Ryland or any number of
Anybody.
contacts. Of, you've got an IT problem. I know that. Sure. I know this. Blah blah blah. So that networks, and it's more than we didn't network. We didn't even call it networking. We were comrades
Absolutely.
involved
Absolutely.
in a common struggle. Hanover Park. I mean, absolutely some of my my best years ever, and some besides the Neff brothers. You were a bit younger at that stage, so maybe Joa and I think Ruben to some extent.
And I suppose Gordon as well, because Gordon and yourself met also
Gordon
at
and I
Oakland
were at
Side.
school together.
Yes.
And Gordon, I think he's your oldest brother.
Eldest brother, yeah.
He was either 1 or 2 standards ahead of me, but I mean.
Okay. I think a year ahead of you. He was in
Yes,
70,
yeah.
77 he finished, I think. But
Yeah.
but anyway.
Yeah.
Just
So I mean, intellectually and politically, he was like a cut above the rest. He was like, I think he came in the top 10 in history in the country, etc. So I don't recall him being part of Hanover Park Youth per se. More
not at all.
Joseph and
Ruben.
Ruben and Joseph's.
And might I say, as young as I were myself as well,
Yeah.
I actually attended all this youth movement. I used to go in the middle of basically in the winter days, sometimes 6 o'clock it's dark, and we used to walk up Southern Road right up to the Civic Center, and we used to meet at the back, I think, of the rent office. There was a little place there. And it was amazing, the commitment. Nobody forced us to go.
Yeah.
We just said, no, but something's wrong. We need something needs to be done,
Yes.
And I think a lot, and you were mentioning them earlier, is that a lot of these guys have done fairly well for themselves in terms of what they've become and what they've achieved in life. And even if it's not like fancy house or fancy car, but the intellectual property where they're going, they way above. And you mentioned people are a little bit above in terms of where they stand. And I think the Nova Park people turned out that way. You mentioned Albert Fritz. I think it was James America at the
Derek
time.
America.
Derek
Yeah.
America. He was involved yourself. Um, um, uh, quite a Patricia Hendricks,
Robert
Abrams
Jethro.
now, Rowley. So and it's people that we know on a personal level.
Yeah.
Like you said, we were more than comrades. You
Yeah.
could pick up the phone and say, "Guys, I need you. What can we do?" You know,
Yeah.
and often we forget about these things. A lot of these guys opened their homes. You were mentioning Isaac Peterson. You were mentioning Trevor Armstrong. It was an open home to any comrade that was in trouble.
Absolutely.
And they would go out of their way to solve the problem. If somebody was arrested, they would go and get things sorted, you
Absolutely.
know.
Absolutely.
So it was amazing,
Yeah.
amazing times. And it was tough times. I
Yeah.
mean, all of us came from a rather poor type of background and upbringing.
Mm.
And it wasn't an easy grow up process.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my parents stayed in Lotus River, so and I mean, so my personal circumstances, which I won't go into, was tough, as you point out, and I mean, we had to make do with very little, but at the same time, we didn't complain about resources. I mean, nowadays, when you speak about what are the challenges now, and how do we solve some of those challenges, I mean, now everything boils down to resources. Government is not doing X, therefore we can't do Y. But in those days, we used to get by with very little, and if we needed something, we used to fundraise.
And not only that, we used to work for it.
Yeah, that's
We
what
used to go out and work for it. We
that's
didn't expect handouts from anybody.
absolutely.
We'd go out, you'd fundraise, you'd even go to the company and say, listen, what can you give something that we can sell or whatever, you
Absolutely,
know?
absolutely,
So,
and even through doing that, we built up a lot of skills. Organizing stay-awakes or fundraising stuff, and so it was not just about politics or anti-apartheid, but it was about, I would almost say, our holistic development as people. So our communication skills, our organizational skills, practical skills, making sweaters, all sorts of
and
skills.
printing. Don't
The
forget the
printing,
printing, the printing presses of the time.
I
So,
printing presses and
yeah.
all making banners, arranging transport. I mean, all of that was part of, there's a cliche around the university of the struggle, but I mean, that is real.
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
I mean, I can honestly say, I don't have a degree, I'm not shy to say that, but a lot of what I know today is through my involvement in
Sure.
struggle.
And it was growth. And I know that the government started at one stage. They had this thing where they said a recognition of prior learning, which
Mm,
was the RPL. It's faded somewhat.
mm,
But if you really look back at the organizational skills of what we had and the growth that we went through, I think we all deserve a RPL at the end of the day,
exactly.
because, like you said, things that they cannot learn in university,
Yeah.
we have learned
Yeah,
through
absolutely.
hard
Yes.
work and actually putting in time.
Yes.
So this thing about varsity degrees being the know how the stop and the start of everything is, for me, I don't have a degree as well, and maybe I'm a little bit biased like you know, is that it says to one that you're almost not good enough.
Mm,
But because of all those things, many people have become the self. They don't care about the others anymore. It's not about, I've got my varsity degree, I've got a nice house and a nice car. Why do I need to worry about other people?
yeah.
They didn't want to learn when the opportunity was there for them and so on. And yet we forget that a lot of people don't even have the means to even get halfway there where
Yeah.
they are. So that Ubuntu spirit, and going back to the idea that I have with this whole program, is to look at challenges that we face as a society.
Mm,
And we have attained one part of it, the democracy that we yearned for over the years, but there's still so much to do. There's still so much things that has gone missing that really needed to go be plowed back into society. The housing, one still have 25 years after democracy, we still have people living on the streets with no food. our community centers, and you were mentioning the chess thing that you were big into chess. Half of those things were played in community centers.
Absolutely.
That was made available by the apartheid council at that time for youth to go do extramural activities.
Yeah.
Our schools had chess, we had table tennis, we even had at the one stage, I remember fondly, I was at Oaklands as well, I suppose you know that, and we had little hardcovers that we used to play on the
Table
teachers'
tennis.
desk, table tennis. The cricket bats were our back seats
Yeah.
of our desks, and we used to play in the quads.
Yeah.
No learning can be better than that. And
Absolutely.
all those things have been taken away from schools now. Half of the schools, and I've been involved personally with schools through my IT experience and IT support and so on. And those things are something of the past. Your health, your nail checking, your hair checking, your we have such a big problem with hair nowadays with the tresemme and so on. But these things were checked. We were looked. Is it clean? It's
Yeah.
not about how it looked or what it looked like,
Yeah.
but was it clean?
Yeah.
Did you have a nice bath? Did you wash your hands? Like stuff that was natural for us
Yeah.
has to be told to people now.
Yeah.
So we failed somewhere along the line. We've what they say, we've thrown out the baby with the cot. A lot of good things that we could have used, but we said, no, but that was apartheid stuff. Let's chuck
Yes.
it out. We don't want that. And you, as a teacher, you a college guy and so on, you would know a little bit more than me what's happening in the field.
Yeah.
So, just from your point of view, what do you think? What can be done in our schooling system to even get the people's education, not education in education, but education in life skills? What do you think needs to be done there?
Yeah, look, you started to touch on an aspect that then also became a very key part of my life. Sport and culture to some extent, but so let's look at this at the sports side. And you spoke about participation in sport, but then also the organizing of sport. So people who are not involved with sport automatically only think of the people playing sport. But then everything around that, setting up the club, organizing the fixtures, going to represent your school at another, organizing the uniforms, making sure it's washed, fundraising for a trip. I remember us taking a trip to up the west coast to participate in a rugby tournament. Now, everybody can't afford it, and there's fundraising. So although it was a rugby tournament, all the organizing around that in itself was part of the upskilling of people. So I really wish I knew exactly what went wrong. And I was on a webinar last week where we were reminiscing about, for example, athletics in those days. Just simple thing like athletics and your inter-school sectional meets, and then ending up at the champs of champs.
The ultimate.
The pinnacle. And then again, you may have one or two people per school that manages to get there because there's obviously a lot of schools.
Absolutely. So it's the
Now,
best of the best, in
now
other
that
words.
person, many times they come from a home where they can't afford their Western Province blazer. Now the rest of the school raises funds so that that person can have their blazer. And then that person walks around at school. So their entire self-esteem, their morale, their status in life is boosted in that way. I heard a story last week on the radio where a group of kids at Rhodes, not Rhodes, Windsor High School, clubbed together to buy a blazer, a matric blazer for one of their fellow classmates that couldn't afford it. Now, that kind of Ubuntu, that kind of thing where young people start doing those kinds of things, not being instructed by anybody or looking to government to provide a blazer or somebody else, always pointing the finger away, but deciding to take ownership of a challenge and find
Solutions for it.
And that is what we did in those days. So, from high school, and your brother Gordon may remember that, going on a tour every second year or so, a school tour, was a major, major thing. But now the planning for that started probably a year in advance. I came from Lotus River. There's no ways my parents will be able to afford, and many others like me, to send me on that tour. So what did we do? We raised funds. Teachers and students, side by side over weekends, selling amla and cool drinks,
Sure.
driving around from place to place. I mean, so that there's a collective effort to make sure that everybody who wants to go can go on such a tour. So I don't know whether one calls it activism, but that level of taking ownership of if one were to find the opposite of entitlement, that I need to embrace a problem, and together and collectively we find solutions to problems. I think that level is by and large missing from young people.
And not only from the young people, from our leaders as well.
Absolutely.
And like I said, we don't expect the young people not to take initiatives. But it will go a long way if government can come to the party as well and say, listen, let's sponsor these guys with sports equipment. Let's sponsor them with blazers. I'm not saying that we shouldn't fundraise.
Yeah.
We can collectively say, listen, okay, the government has given this. Let's boost this and let's get everybody involved, and everybody can have a slice of the cake, as it were. So from the side that you just mentioned now, it is absolutely fantastic for organizational skills, Ubuntu, teaching people how to care for each other. But at the same time, especially in our environment, where government comes to the party and says, let's bring these things back to the schools. Let's get our sports things. And I know you know that rugby was big in Oakland. Soccer was big in Oakland. And these guys were fantastic. Some of them reached Western Province colors. I know a few personal of my friends. I was never good at sports, I might add. A little bit of I played every sport, but I was useless at it.
Well, then you're in my category.
And in any case, but we went out there. If it was a sports occasion, we went to support. I used to come stand on the side if my friends played and stuff like that. And that built such a community. And what I could say about Oakland specifically, I can't know. I don't know much about the other schools and so on, but we were a cosmopolitan group of people that came as far as Mitchells Plain, Menenberg, Valhalla Park, Bonteheuwel, and Nova Park, Grassy Park, Lotus River, and Lansdowne and Kenwyn. So we had rich people, stinking rich people, and the very, very poor.
Yes.
And I think that made us a little bit different. I know one of my math teachers, I don't think you'd know him, it was a little bit after your time, Mr. Parker, once said if he had half the resources that the school, the upper school in just further up Livingston had, you'd have achieved wonders at Oakland. But we were a real, if you can call it, almost a South Africa within Oaklands. You know, the very, very poor, the middle people, the middle class, and the very rich, and the way we were all friends.
Yeah.
And
The reason for that, ironically, is the Group Areas Act.
okay,
So the reason why I went to Oaklands was because I went to All Saints Primary, which is in the area. So obviously, everybody stayed in that area. But then the Group Areas Act, which was a bad thing, but it resulted in us moving first to Menenberg and from Menenberg to Lotus River. But my mom said, no. Oaklands is the place for you. So, and that was the case with many. So people had to travel in from all over to Oaklands. So that little bit from the railway line, walking from Lansdowne Station down to the school. So you're absolutely right. Although there was still a little bit of catchment in Kenwyn around the school, but by and large, we had to travel.
most of us.
And coming back to sport, those of us that were not great, okay, so I represented the school in the 800 and the 15. I was good enough to make the school team. But what did the rest of us do? We were put into houses. So when you joined the school, you were in greenhouse for your entire life. Then there was sort of structured songs that you sang for your house, and you went to practice. And when you were supported with your greenhouse, you were dressed in green. And so, although you were not there, the success of the people on the track was also, you were partly responsible for that. The march past. I mean, you remember the march past.
You were part of it. In other words, everybody, irrespective if you weren't a sporty person or active in the actual sport, you were part of the sport. And that was also just to sort of give a little bit more perspective, is drawing in the other people to feel part of this organization, the part of the build, the part of winning. Your house won, you went crazy.
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah.
So and I remember I was actually, I'm saying I wasn't a good sports person, but I was actually a good athlete. I used to be the shortest guy in the damn school, but I could run 100 meters and beat quite a couple of those tall boys, you know. But it makes you proud, and they still have it, but it's not the same. It's that feeling and the atmosphere. It's just, we rush through this. We need to get and unfortunately, and I think you would also know from your personal experience, is that admin has taken over at schools now. A lot of people complain about all the admins they have to. So these things are now sidelined in favor of, hey, I need to go get done. I need to go finish my thing, and the report needs to go to the principal. The principal needs to send it to WCD or whatever. So a lot of those things have now become overwhelming, and people can't do everything, you know. So we need to go back, step a few steps back, and see what has worked in the past. The things that didn't work, take it out and chuck it out. We're happy with that. But the things that worked, we need to slowly bring back in the schools. I don't know, you know Vernon Barley, and Mr. Tastem and those type of guys, Mrs. Cap. They were all part of our growth. Like you said, a lot of them were New Unity Movement. A lot of them, I know that Miss Cap introduced me to the Joan Byers. Byers is the John Denvers of the time, and so on. And it's stuff that you won't get to know, you know. That is just your personal favorite if you listen to it, and it's on YouTube or whatever. But these people physically said, come, let's sit down, each of us, and they actually educated us where these songs come from, and so on.
It's maybe unfair to generalize, but to share our experiences from those days, I get a sense, and again, I don't want to sound negative because I don't know enough about teachers today, but I really get the sense, if I think back, that teaching was a calling for most of those people. You start mentioning the names, and we can go on, and how I got the sense that those teachers cared more. And some of the teachers you mentioned, they were in the Unity Movement and in SAGF. So,
and these, sorry, Donny, just to interrupt quickly, I'm just mentioning this few. There were so many others as well. Scruder, there was Brian, not Brian Scruder. What was Scruder's name? Can't remember, but Scruder was his surname. It was the Hassans. There were so many others, and they were deeply involved. But Mr. Engel, Richard Engel.
Guru.
You know, these guys were all involved, but quietly, because obviously you couldn't get too involved because you become a target. So, but a lot of these guys imparted so much wisdom to us, and I was thinking the other day that our young sons, you know, as you gain experience, and you are one of those wise guys, as you gain experience and you meet people, you become wiser and wiser. In other words, you now have wisdom. Now, what has happened in the past with our previous governments and stuff like that, that wisdom was passed down to the younger ones. Now, when these guys get to 21 or 22, they are wise already. But with our kids, we let them go on, and they have to go through the same experiences that we've gone through to get the wisdom,
Yeah.
which that is also a part where I feel that we should part some of the wisdom to the younger generation. And if they want to take it, it's fine. If they don't, it's fine as well.
Yeah.
But wisdom are earned, almost to say. You earn wisdom through your experiences and going forward. And that wisdom needs to be brought back to the younger generation and sort of tell them, listen, this is what worked. When it's your time to lead, and we mustn't forget we've got people that I laugh sometimes because the people make fun of it, is that we've got old age pensioners leading us at the moment. They're all over 60, some
Yeah.
of them are 70, some of them are over 80.
Yeah.
So when it's time for the young people to start leading, they will have the wisdom of these people. They must be ready. They must be at 40, 50 and have the wisdom of the 80-year-old, and that is the way that we have to move forward and think. And I'm going to, because I'm just doing the interview. I'm going to let you, as a sort of just a final roundup to the thing, just talk about how do you think that we can fix whatever. We don't know what is wrong really. But there's a lot of things happening and things that we didn't think that would still be here in our time. Um, and it's not being, the solution is not forthcoming in as we see it in the near future. So we need to, as activists and strugglers and people that can talk and have some kind of influence, we need to say, listen, this is the steps that we need to go, that we need to do to make things better. In your view, what do you think can we as activists, as people, and then as government, what can they do to make things easier for us to make things better?
There's so many things, but I'm going to sum it up into what I regard as the crucial things, man. So, what was the success of the past? The things we've been speaking about now for the last 45 minutes or so. In my view, it was leadership. I'm not being arrogant now, we were good leaders. Um, and we led youth movements in Hanover Park, in Mitchell's Plain, in Tafelsig, where we managed to involve hundreds, if not thousands, of young people. And the overwhelming majority of those people ended up okay. The overwhelming majority. So as a result of leadership. So if you ask what needs to be done, we need to identify, train, and mentor leaders, but then also provide them with the resources. So yes, I romantically say that we managed to get by with nothing in those days, but we must be, the reality of today is different. So we can find young community activists, unemployed, that has leadership potential, that has communication skills, that has organizational skills, and if they don't have it, they can be trained. And then the older folk, like me and you, me slightly more than you, this kind of wisdom that you're speaking about, we can mentor young people. We can share this on an ongoing and structured way, help people plan, help them monitor their plans, but also train people in entrepreneurship, in running programs in communities, in charging. So some of these sports, arts, culture things can be run, but teachers are not set well to do that. So you can get one or two, three people from a community. So the bottom line, before I get too romantic and go off on a tangent, for me, it's about leadership, about making sure you have good leaders in place in communities that can then run developmental programs. I disagree that government should be providing fish and equipment and sports equipment. So you and I can have a philosophical discussion about that. And it's the old cliche of, do you give people fish or do you teach them how to fish? That old cliche. And I believe, and it's been my experience, that I've gained much more. And that's the problem with our young people. They don't struggle. Mommy, I need a tackies. Nike's got a sale. 1,200 Rand later. So no need to earn those tackies over a period of time. You've got to do X, Y, and Z if you want those tackies. And that's just one of thousands of examples where our young people, they're not made to earn things, earn wisdom, as you spoke about earlier on. So I think government's role is to provide training, um, to provide impact assessment, policy, that kind of stuff. Government, in my view, must stay in its lane. Government should not implement programs in Hanover Park. The people of Hanover Park must implement and sustain programs in Hanover Park. But they need to be supported by a variety of stakeholders, which includes government, but it could also include
Private sector,
private
activists.
sector, the churches, etc., etc. Um, so I mean, I can go on and on, but I would hone in on that we need we need good sustainable programs in communities that is led by good and credible and trained and supported.
And also,
Yes.
just to add on that, honest people with integrity.
Yes.
You know, often what happens, these stuff are all there, but it disappears systematically
Yeah.
from places.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of money is being spent, but the money don't come out where it's really needed. And this is the partnership that you're talking about. It shouldn't be one organization. It should be multiple faceted, where people can check on each other as well, because sometimes things are maybe, I don't know, tempting. You know, there's a lot of funds here. Okay, sorry, just to conclude again, on that last part, Donny, is just the mentorship of those people.
Absolutely.
And like I just mentioned before, you guys were a few years ahead of us, but credible leadership. And one, these young people that want to come into organization and want to lead immediately, they need to take a back seat, just sit a little bit around. Yes, we acknowledge that you're a leader, but you need to be mentored by people that sometimes is even less educated than yourself. But you just need to take your time to find yourself, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a, we're getting into detail, but there's obviously some kind of process and leadership cycle, if you will, because again, we went to training and senior comrades of the likes of Johnny Issel, Trevor, we learned at the feet in sport. I learned at the feet of Joe Ibrahim and Colin Clark. So the whole cycle of being trained, undergoing training, showing your worth, showing your skills, and then, yeah, technically being elected into a leadership position, but more than that, earning your
role there. You belong there.
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't a buddy thing, which we can bring back to our current system as well, where people are employed based on who they know and not how they've worked to come there.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. So for me, let's speak about community-based, credible, strong organizations led by strong, credible leaders. And if you have those two in tandem, you've got a good organization. They will keep people accountable. They will prevent corruption. They will put in place proper processes. And if people are wrong, they'll get rid of them. Get other people
Get rid of them. Yeah.
Today's 20-year-old is going to be 30 in 10 years' time, and then that person plays the role of mentoring those behind them. So
absolutely,
it's moving away from the culture of entitlement that the government must provide everything for us, but to take ownership of your own challenges. And then I want to end off by maybe on a controversial note, by saying that there are resources in community. The poorest of communities has got resources. But I say it's getting people to put their money, their limited resources, in the right places. Not wasted on alcohol and cigarettes, but on doing something for children in communities.
Donny, just on the last part here, I just want to bring in, Um, did you ever have a humorous, a funny part in your struggle that we had? Can you think? If you can't think of
Sure,
anything right now, it's
sure. There's
fine.
so many there's so many bits of humor. I mean, I can have another session with you, but I mean, I just there's so many things that stand out. Um, Now, and it comes back to resources. There was a time when my Honda 175cc was the primary means of transport in an entire youth organization.
Yeah.
So, to take people home after a meeting, literally, I'm not exaggerating now, 4 or 5 people on that tiny little scrambler of mine. Somehow, I don't know how we managed it,
Sure.
from the handlebar to the tank.
I still remember
In
that.
those days, the TVs were those big Sony
Massive,
jobs.
massive.
So that bike of mine doubled up as a bucky, and I'm not exaggerating
Oh,
once again. So the
good
TV has
grief.
to get. My tea, I was a teacher, so I was a little bit middle class. I'm not going to, I mean, it's just the reality, it's just the fact. So my Sony TV, I think black and white was the norm, but I had a color Sony TV.
Wow.
Used to go on the back of that bike
Sure.
because you had to go and show videos at
Youth.
the youth and
At
back
the youth.
again. So
Good grief.
I mean, when it comes to humor, there's so much. There's
Sure.
so many
Amazing.
funny moments. So
Amazing
and
stuff.
that's important. It was not just about being serious and fighting and etc. etc. We had funny people in our organizations. We had funny incidents.
And it was fun. It was
Absolutely.
fun to be there. It was more than a youth movement for activists. It
Absolutely.
was a youth movement to have hikes and to go up the mountains, go
Absolutely.
discover things, go to Paul Rock
Absolutely.
and go have a weekend there in the white neighborhood, as it were, and nobody would know that you're there.
I remember going to Maiden's Cove. So we have to, by public transport. So we take a train to Cape Town Station, then we have to walk
Up Clove Street.
and then down the glen.
Yes.
And I remember us whole as a youth, and it was during the time of the red meat boycott.
Sure.
And I vividly remember people like Ralph Simpson, who's now in New Zealand, and Bertie being part, and then we make fun. They must like hold me back. Now man, these people are eating red meat. They're not supposed to eat red meat. Hold me back, man. Hold me fast. So I mean, there were just tons of those. Again, the red meat boycott. I can't get to this man's name. I picture him, apparently passed away in St. Dominic's Church, having a huge public meeting about the red meat boycott, and this comrade really wanting this boycott to come to an end.
To an end? Yeah, it's too long.
As I'm standing here, I'm half chicken and half fish.
Oh my word.
Really
Ek kan nie meer. Hoe kan julle dis nou die hoogste ding is soos jy nou voorheen gemention het, is amper soos 'n sigaret en wyn van die mense wil vat.
Yeah, there were many wonderful characters. And I mean,
Fantastic.
It's important to try and capture
Absolutely.
even more of those.
Donny, I thank you for your time. I know you've got a busy schedule, myself as well. And I want to take this forward and actually release this to the young people and that mentorship that we're talking about. And hopefully somebody will check, yes, this guy's he's the man, he's the guy that really opened up things for us.
Yeah.
And I thank you.
You're welcome.
And you might just get a call or two from people saying, hey, who's this guy? And
follow up, you're welcome.
lovely. But I'm even taking it further and saying you might get a call from somebody totally different that might have watched this thing and say, no, I need to speak to this guy. This guy is brilliant or whatever. He's a good leader. We need to tap into his resources. And once again, I know this is the type of Ubuntu things that we need from people. And to take South Africa forward is that we need to share. We need to share our knowledge. We need to share our resources. We need to share our experience and our wisdom. But thanks once again. I really enjoyed this conversation. I always love your stories. I'm a big fan of you in any case. So thanks once again. And thanks for your role in the struggle and your role for getting us where we are now. Thank you. Thanks, Donny.
Cool.